It's just a jump to the left. Now put your hands on your hips.
Let's do the time warp again.
Yeah, we love how slow it is.
That's what it's known for. Slow song.
Let's do the time warp again.
Choir teacher's just losing it.
Yeah. Welcome back. How I'm not well, so we won't talk about it. But
that'll be the
I'm
banter
sick.
for Adam.
I do apologize if you hear sniffles or coughing. I will try my best to make sure those don't happen, but no guarantees. This is your warning.
You also edit the podcast, so you could easily just cut that
I know,
out.
but we're on
Pick
the
out
same
every
channel,
single
RJ.
sniffle.
So if you're talking and I cough,
I will make a
you're gonna hear
conscious
it.
effort to mute my microphone when you are sniffling or coughing. Oh, coughing at least. I think sniffling is harder to do. Just like that.
Molly,
Molly, how's 2 more weeks in San Diego?
High today was 92
Jesus.
Wow.
in October, so not complaining.
We turned our heat on today.
We turned our heat on.
Yeah, I don't know what that's like. I can't relate to it. You know, I've now
Heat,
fully
weird.
forgotten
Central
what
heat,
winter
what's
is.
that?
Yeah.
The snow is so pretty. I've heard. I wouldn't know.
Gosh, I've never seen snow in person before, so I have no idea.
That was the weirdest thing when I moved to Florida was the number of people who had never seen
Who
snow.
genuinely hadn't. Yeah.
And I was
I
like,
don't know.
wow, that's crazy.
I'll have to ask people once I get to know more people who actually like grew up here. Because I know in California there's like mountains not
Yeah.
super far away, so I would guess
That's
most
true.
people have been
'Cause
to a
people
place
still,
that
like-
has snow.
Yeah, California's still very big, like skiers and
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, Central
Yeah.
Florida, you have to go pretty far to see snow.
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
chatted with Rita today. She and Steve are at a conference right now in Park Slope, Utah, and apparently my dad has decided they're going to move there. So
oh,
Great.
we might be visiting the mountains soon.
wow, cabin folk, ski folk.
Cabin folk, but a very different kind of cabin. Already cabin folk in northern Wisconsin. Park Slope cabins, I'm guessing, are different. My question is, can I get a cup of coffee in Park Slope though? Because I feel like I can't.
If your only place to get coffee is a Starbucks, why even go? I need
I meant-
left.
I meant because of
Utah,
Mormons.
girl. She meant
Oh.
Yeah.
Utah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Speaking of Mormons,
I thought you were
wow.
just saying you're so left that you don't even you need a
So
local
left that I'm
coffee
like,
shop.
Is this
I
fair
need
trade?
a local. I need it to be like I need you to have hand milked those
Handcrafted.
oats, girl. Like,
Right.
yeah.
I need latte art, honey, on
Mhm.
top.
Mhm.
Speaking of Mormons, Adam and I saw Book of Mormon for the
I
first
saw
time.
Book of Mormon.
Oh, what'd you think?
Have you seen it?
I haven't, but I was in a car ride where somebody went on a long rant about how racist it is. So
Oh.
Molly, it is straight camp. It is.
It's straight people camp.
yeah,
It is their version
Straight
of.
people camp. Wow,
I know. They have capacity to
they can
understand.
do
that.
something. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
It was good. I can obviously yes.
I
it's
get
like-
why people like it.
I get why people
it's
like it.
not for me.
I get also why
Mhm.
people are like, okay, like yeah, the race stuff, but it's just.
I think the question is like, who has the positionality to like make fun of? I think the intention is to like
Yes.
make fun of the Mormons' view of Africa, right?
Yeah.
But like, if it's then playing to a group of white people who are like all laughing along, like, where's the line? Yeah.
they think it's funny that they think Africa is the Lion King, and so
Right.
they actually think that's funny rather than what a commentary on how small-minded the Mormons are.
It's the ironic racism thing that we were like super into in 2012, right? That was like our
very
whole
Family Guy,
It's so
Yeah.
Glee.
and
It's so Glee.
And just by that I mean like, we're gonna make fun of the stereotypes.
Yeah. I thought, by the way, speaking of reading the Google Doc notes ahead of time, when I opened up the doc today, and Adam, you had mentioned Glee in your relationship to the
Mhm.
musical, so you're also on summary, and I thought that your plan for the summary was simply to recount the Glee episode of Rocky Horror, and I was like,
You
Sir.
never know. I didn't write a summary, so you never
didn't,
know.
so we're gonna see.
That might be what happens.
Well, this week, as Molly mentioned, I do have to summarize Miss Rocky Horror Picture Show
Without coughing.
without a coughing, sniffling, and in a minute or less. So extra challenge this week.
Okay. Adam, this is your summary, and your time starts now.
Rocky Horror Picture Show stars Susan Sarandon and nope. We're gonna start over. Take two.
I'm just nervous for you, honey.
Okay. Take two.
This is your 1-minute summary of Rocky Horror Picture Show, and your time starts now.
Our story begins at a wedding of friends. I don't remember their names, but Brad and Janet have been to a wedding. They talk about how much they love each other. He ends up proposing after the wedding. And then afterward, they're going to take a drive to see their former science teacher. But their car, in this massive rainstorm, their tire goes flat and they don't have a spare. So they go to the nearest castle to see if there's a phone and encounter Magenta and Riff Raff, who are the servants to Dr. Frankenfurter, who has created Rocky, his Frankenstein thing, basically. There's also a plot line where there was a former person he created named Eddie. And then Eddie ties back to Dr. Scott because Eddie was Dr. Scott's nephew. So I'm a little confused in all of this, to be honest. But it ends with Magenta, Frankenfurter, and what's his name? And Riff Raff are all aliens. And so they need to go back to their home planet of Transylvania. But Frankenfurter wants to stay on Earth and have kinky sex with the Earthlings. So then they kill Frankenfurter, and then the 3 humans get away. And that's it. That was a really bad summary. I deeply apologize. It missed the middle of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple things. One, just because I feel like pedants are going to tweet at us. So Rocky is the creation. He's the monster. And obviously Frankenstein is the creator of
Yes,
the creature in the original novel. We all know this. You're not impressing anyone by pointing it out anymore.
Wow.
Also,
I just love that, Molly, you have the foresight to do that because... to be so no one tweets at us.
Nobody
no
we're
one
else to do enough
Maybe
podcasts with this
you
podcast.
should tweet at us.
Actually do tweet at us. Oh my gosh, we got an email that we should read. We finally got an email. We'll have to make time for that.
Yes, we'll save it to the end.
Also, I don't think Eddie was a creation unless I missed it.
No, Eddie was a delivery boy that he took and used his part of his brain for Rocky. But only used half of it. That's why he was in a freezer.
Okay, yeah, because Frankenfurter has some line about using half of Eddie's brain and half of... Isn't Columbia the other woman in the castle?
Yeah, yes.
The tap dancer who was in love with Freddy.
Yeah.
So Columbia and Eddie had relationships with Frankenfurter, I think, and then he took half of both of their brains and put them in Rocky. I think something like that. So I think it's
unclear, and honestly, I will say, doesn't really matter.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. The point is that everybody is wrapped up in Frankenfurter's whole business that he's doing. I think the other piece of the plot that's probably important to know is that Frankenfurter also seduces both Brad and Janet. And then also later, Janet seduces Rocky, I would say.
Yeah.
And so then there ends up being sexual jealousy, Frankenfurter and Janet, because she cabareted with his creation.
Yeah.
And so that leads to kind of the big blowout. He also violently murders Eddie when Eddie breaks out of his cold storage. And so that is ultimately kind of the big thing he does that he gets a comeuppance for in the end.
Yeah.
The horror, you could say.
The one piece of horror in the film.
The horror picture show.
Rocky is named Rocky Horror, in the cast. In the credits at the end.
Yeah.
So that is his full name.
Yeah.
Family name of horror.
Just like some people may think that Dr. Frankenfurter, his name is Rocky Horror, but it's actually Dr. Frankenfurter. It's the creature that's named Rocky Horror.
Mm-hmm.
You never know.
You never know. And if you have a type of way about that, why don't you tweet at us?
Tweet at us. Yeah.
I dare you.
Well, we have to talk about the relationship to Rocky Horror. So, I'll go first because unfortunately, Mine is the Glee episode. I've never seen this movie, and I've had many opportunities to.
Really? Just
Yeah. I think I owned it for a while. I think Mom bought it for me once, and I just was like, I'm not interested.
I mean, you're also a 30-year-old man, so I feel like you've had the opportunity, in theory, to watch truly any movie.
Yeah.
That's true.
The Robbie and Jesse would talk about how they would sometimes, once in a while, they would go watch the midnight because they used to do it at the Universal movie theater.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I've never seen it until 2 days ago. So, and I just know like the imagery, like the lips. I know it's Tim Curry. I think that's about, and then Time Warp. I think Time Warp is probably the most famous song for sure.
Is Time Warp what they play at
it is
not at Showgays, at Sidetrack?
At Showgays we play it every week.
Yeah, because then when we
buy that bar, yeah.
When you do the pelvic thrust, everyone goes butt sex, butt sex, butt sex, butt sex.
Yeah, what's that a reference to? I wonder. Why?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's so weird. People just assume. Yeah. So crazy.
Yeah, lots of time for sure.
Also, Sidetrack, what a great place if we ever get famous to do our first live show.
Oh my God.
We'll have to fly you in, Molly.
Yes.
With the
I will pay for a
pockets.
plane ticket if Sidetrack lets me do a live show there.
Also, once in a while, I'll feel like, I feel like there's no more musical. Like we're running out of musicals.
We just go to Musical Mondays, and then they show a video. I'm like, that's a new one. Yeah.
RJ, you'd seen Rocky Horror?
Yes, so I had seen this movie back in high school when I had a very active Blockbuster membership. And so I kind of would just like pick a random movie every week because famously, gorgeously, I had my own TV in my bedroom and I thought I was so cool. And so I would just rent out movies, and I rented this. I didn't realize it was a musical until I was like watching it. I was like, oh, it's a musical. And
I started.
Oh yeah. Well, I just assumed that was like, it's like an opening.
Yeah. To be fair, the lips is like kind of outside of the film. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I was like, oh, fun. This is fun. And then I think like 2 years later, my speech and debate coach, she was who is a cast member in that Julia show on HBO Max. So make sure you stream that as well.
That Julia show?
Julia Child. So there's a show.
It's called Julia.
It's called Julia. Yes. She plays her assistant. She was in a production of Rocky Horror that we watched as like her students.
The Rocky Horror show.
The Rocky Horror, yes, the musical on stage, and she played Eddie and Dr. Scott as like a dual double act thing, and I was like shook at the time. I was like, oh, wow. And then like that introduced me to like, wow, unconventional casting. How fun. But I also don't know, like on stage, is unconventional casting conventional in Rocky Horror? So I don't know. That's the only one production I've seen. So I don't know if that's like a standard, but I've also just known that, there are midnight showings of this movie. I've never been to one, but I know people dress up for it. And I just knew that was a thing. So
we'll get ready for the quiz later, RJ.
Ooh.
Molly.
Ooh.
Thoughts on Rocky Horror? Thoughts on your relationship to Rocky Horror?
I remember stumbling across this movie on TV someday, like late at night. The rest of the family had gone to bed when I want to say 11, 12. And I was like, what is this? How are they allowed to put this on television?
Oh my God.
And do you know what? And just because I want to assure Rita to not freak out about the fact that I was managed to expose myself to this
you
movie,
are a bad mother. And we're here to say it on this pod.
I do think that while I'm glad that then I I've watched it a few times since then and now really appreciate its campiness, I feel like the fact that the first time I watched it, I was like, what on earth is happening? Makes it like this movie that maintains this air of like, scandalousness for me that's actually kind of fun, and I'm glad that I always feel a little bit like, ooh, Rocky Horror, are we like all allowed to like talk about this in public? Like, really?
Yeah. I mean, I watched this for the first time 2 days ago at the big old age of 30, and I was still like, oh my god,
Yeah.
clutching my pearls.
It is a pearl clutch worthy movie. So I did watch it a bit too young, but I I love it to this day.
Did you watch the whole thing, or was it like in the middle and you finished it?
I think I thought when I was watching it that it was not the beginning because I was so confused about what was happening. But I think I tuned in when like they were in the rain or something. It was towards the beginning.
Sure.
I know for sure that I saw the whole lab scene because I remember the like coming up in the elevator and they open and I was like, what is this? What is going on?
The set in this movie is so good. It's so good.
This house.
The house of a bunch.
The house of horror.
Well, let's talk about Rocky Horror Show. So Rocky Horror Show is the original musical that the Rocky Horror Picture Show is based on. So opened in 1973 in the West End. It was like in a tiny little upstairs, like I think it's like 63-seat theater.
Very little shop almost.
Very little shop, yeah. They're very similar. Music, lyrics, and book are by Richard O'Brien, who plays Riff Raff in the movie. So there's
I saw that and I double checked it because I was like, I don't know another Tom and John McCrae situation.
Right.
But it is
The
McCraes.
The McCraes, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is his baby. You may know him if you're a millennial or Gen Z as the voice of the dad in Phineas and Ferb, which seems like a weird trajectory that his career took at some point.
Great trajectory, love it.
I mean, he said a Disney show. You said great, consistent.
He's a very interesting person. I'll tell you a little bit about him. So he was inspired by sci-fi and schlocky B horror films, very similar to the Howard Ashman situation for Little Shop. And this musical was something he developed while he was like out of a job. So he would just go home at night and then like write this musical. And it was only like 40 minutes, like the first version that debuted. It wasn't long. And they actually added Time Warp because they were like, we need to pad this out more. So they added Time Warp just as like a fun number.
I can see that.
He said he was influenced by British glam rock at the time. So like the Bowie-ification.
Which I think you can really see in Frankenfurter.
Sure. So now he is like third gender is what he calls himself. That's how he identifies. He does use he him pronouns, so it's fine using that. But he's like also had some weird, I mean, you can read his Wikipedia page, but he's had like some weird comments about the trans thing.
What is it with
I don't know.
British?
I'm not going to police his words because obviously I'm just a cis guy. Like I'm not whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's not for me to step in and tell someone who's third gender who knows more about the gender experience than obviously I do to some degree, or the spectrum of gender. It wasn't bad what he said. Like he's just said like trans women will never have the experience of like being women from birth. Trans women will never be cis women.
I know. I
just wanted to preface that in case someone.
I think that the UK in general has like a different relationship to all of this than we do. I think we should say, and that we're going to be three cis people talking a lot about gender on this podcast.
A lot of gender.
Just everybody know that as we're going into it.
I did want to mention that because we had to do the thing for L. Frank Baum and talk about how he hated Native Americans or whatever. So just need to get it out of the way.
We're bringing everyone's skeletons out.
Controversial figure. And we're going to talk more about the whole history of trans people at the time that this was written and stuff and the language use and everything like that. So I think that
this is going to be our longest episode ever. Get ready, girls.
Truly, it's going to be a deep dive, honey. But I think that it'll be clear as we talk about that history too, why it's like so touchy and difficult, because there's a long history, I think, of people like kind of saying like, I'm the normal version of this thing, right? And so that's why it's so, people get so tense anytime that a person who's at all in the trans community says something that's maybe critical of another part of the trans community. Long history of that and things going badly because of it. So but I think, to me, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, I'll just say, I think to me the fact that one of the authors of this has like a beyond cis experience of gender is like very important to understanding the whole musical.
100%.
Yeah.
So this show ran until like 1979 in London, which is like crazy. Like it moved to a bunch of different theaters the whole time, so it never like stayed one place for very long. But it like London, like this was the girl. She ate this up.
Absolutely.
She came to America and did 3 previews and 45 performances and said, "That's it. It's not for us." American had a very different experience with this show. And I don't know what specifically the reason
was
is.
it Broadway or was it off?
It was off Broadway, but it was in New York. And I think there's a part of it, to be honest, and I think this is also where some of the like weird trans stuff in the UK is, what I mean to say, is like their comedy somehow always comes back to men.
Look at the man in the dress.
Men in dresses. Yeah.
And we've discussed this before on this pod. Have we?
Yeah.
Or is this Harry Potter where I've discussed this?
You leaned forward like assertively, like, oh, we're gonna talk about it.
Adam, you have discussed this in Harry Potter.
I've discussed this on Harry Potter.
Millennials because of the book, the Boggart.
Oh, yeah, because Snape in a dress.
Is in a dress,
because
and they're like,
funny?
isn't that funny?
The comedy is Snape's in a dress.
Yeah.
A man in women's clothing. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I think that's also like a weird thing about the UK is that like it's almost like they can only see men in women's clothing as like a joke. Like there's no other way to engage with it, which is so funny because they gave us glam rock.
I mean, like, I don't know. Even though I engage with like a lot of British cultural products, I don't even know that I can comment on it. But I just think that like they have drag, but it's like from a different place in history, right? I feel like they talk about this on like Drag Race UK, which I've only ever seen the first season of, to be fair. But like I feel like on UK they talk about like that they're like trying to be seen as doing something more than like man in a dress, panto show, whatever, because that's like a set expectation, right, of like what drag is there. But obviously that's not the whole story. To your point about Bowie, is Bowie British? Yeah. Glam rock, and I think there have probably been a lot of people trying to challenge that for a long time there.
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's just one of the many things that separate Americans from British people. Is we have very different comedy tastes. That's, I think, just in general. I think sometimes things work better in the UK that don't work here, and vice versa. That's all.
Sure.
But yeah, the Ghosts U.S. show on
the
TBS.
Ghosts U.S. show, which is based on the UK show Ghosts. They're both good, apparently, allegedly.
So maybe the writers of Ghosts understand the difference between the two comedy tastes.
Yeah, maybe.
Sure.
So we should have them.
Yeah. I think people overblow the like difference. Like I enjoy a lot of British comedy, so I don't think it's like impossible for an American to understand what British people find
like
funny.
Yeah,
it's just it's like on the margins, I think, where the differences are often, rather than being totally incompatible.
Yeah. Yeah. So this led me down a weird rabbit hole. So the New York show had this weird criticism, apparently from Rex Reed, who's a New York critic. Have you heard this name before? Rex Reed. It sounds familiar, right?
It feels a little bit familiar.
So he said that the show is basically only for homosexuals. That was his like criticism. He was like,
Well,
it's not for
is that
anybody.
criticism, honey?
Mama, that should be the marketing slogan.
That's on the marquee.
Absolutely.
So I was like, this man's name sounds familiar. So I clicked his name on Wikipedia and we went on a little rabbit hole. So
The
here's
Rex rabbit hole.
his section on he has been a New York critic for years and years and years. He's like 83. He's from Fort Worth, Texas. None of that matters. These
It's
are
all
the
making me
weird,
nervous, though.
Yeah,
these
it's
are
not
the
good.
weird things that I found out about him. So, as you may know, Marissa Tomei won the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for My Cousin Vinny in 1992. Iconic role. Truly
very
incredible.
good.
If you've never watched My Cousin Vinny, seek it out immediately. It's so
I haven't, so I do need to
I
look
would
right now.
I would literally stop the podcast, not stop this recording, but like we should do an episode of My Cousin Vinny.
I've seen a clip of her famous courtroom scene.
My Cousin
Absolutely.
Vinny would be a great musical.
Oh, yeah.
Has anyone ever done that? I feel like maybe someone's done
In
that.
a Fringe, probably.
In a friend.
So she won the Oscar, and a lot of people were very surprised because traditionally, they don't give comedy awards any awards. They don't give comedy roles any awards, is what I meant to say. So he was the one who started the rumor that she didn't actually win, and her name was read mistakenly, which has like
has
been a
never
rumor
happened.
for years. Like it's been
And
a
that-
thing
that's-
for years.
And as we've discussed, that never happens in the Oscars.
Well, no.
Nope.
He said this whole thing where they were like they didn't read her name, and whoever read it wanted her to win, so they just said their name, and then the Academy didn't correct it because they didn't want to be seen that they didn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And PricewaterhouseCooper, who we already have talked about on this podcast before, who the auditors have said like, no, we have things that will happen that are in place, and that's what happened with La La Land, is they came out and corrected it in real time. So when that all happened, the La La Land thing, they came back to him and they were like, do you feel bad about what you said? And he was like, no, I don't feel bad because I really don't think she won it, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's just never backed down, which is crazy.
That is so crazy to be like a full, like, you know, like the election wasn't won, but for Marissa Tomei, like that energy, but for
Marissa
this
Tomei,
thing.
truther, yeah.
Okay, so it gets worse. So he said Marlee Matlin only won the Best Actress Oscar for her role in Children of a Lesser God because it was out of pity.
Wow, this man is a real treat.
In reviewing the 2003 South Korean film Old Boy, he said, what else can you expect from a nation weaned on kimchi, a mixture of raw garlic and cabbage buried underground until it rots, dug up from the grave, and then served in earthenware pots sold at the Seoul airport as souvenirs?
My God.
What is his point?
What is his point? Just like,
What is the point?
And so the movie is
So the movie
good?
is
Like
good.
what is the
The movie is fermented at the right.
they know how to take their
They
time
really
when
know.
crafting things? Like what are you trying to say?
He went into this whole thing about Melissa McCarthy being fat during the Identity Thief era.
Wow,
a
so
movie which is,
brave
like,
to point that out.
Also, it's not a good movie, but there are many other reasons it's not a good movie that have nothing to do with how Melissa McCarthy's body type is. Anyway, that was a whole thing. And then when they like talked about, or like people like pushed back, he was like, well, I'm just worried about her health. Let's
Yeah.
put this to bed. That is never
the issue.
Ever.
That is never the issue.
Yeah.
No one is ever. No, it's because you hate fat people.
Because who else's health do you ever? Has anyone ever like written a whole movie review and been like, I heard that they smoke those. I'm just like really worried about their health. I feel like this is very like the whole like, oh, you're trying to be woke reaction that movies get now if they're just like is a black character, because you have to be woke to like know that there are people that aren't white that exist in the world.
Yeah.
But he's doing it in like the 80s, and so I like almost admire him for like being so ahead of the trend. Do you know
Sure.
what I mean?
Sure.
Of just being like
He
a
was
deaf
a
person
douchebag before
can act.
douchebags were like
that
a whole
it
genre.
can't truly just be that she's an actor. Like there has to be an explanation.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. Yeah.
In his last one, and this is all, then we can move on, but this is horrifying. He talked about how disabled people are defective creatures. This is about a movie called The Shape of Water, which won Best Picture.
Because she was deaf and
she was
mute?
mute. So he called disabled people defective creatures, and her character was mute, but he called her, quote, mentally handicapped.
Because it's all in your mind, baby.
Here's the thing. At some point, just stop publishing these people. Like, you
Yes.
someone
Stop
keeps
giving
giving him
runs.
money to like review
Well,
shit.
but do they like who
Or is
publishes
he just
Shape of
putting this
Water
out
review?
there? Yeah.
I'd have to go back to his page and look. I
Because he
think
may
it was
just
New
have a
York
blog
Post,
now.
A dog
The
with a blog,
Post,
okay.
which
yeah.
isn't terribly surprising since it's a Murdoch paper, but it just, my God.
Rupert Murdoch, by the way, not Murdoch, famed Canadian crime show that can do no wrong. Love
Sure.
that show.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Famously,
there's like
that's
3
obviously
people
how we
listening
think.
who've watched Murdoch Mysteries who are losing their minds about the fact that
Molly,
Murdoch
we're
scam.
about to get tweets and emails.
The
Every
emails
grandma
we're
in
gonna get.
Canada is so excited right now that I've mentioned Murdoch Mysteries.
So let's talk about the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So it is
Is that what today's podcast is about?
I thought it was.
It's not about the criticisms that Rex Reed has said online.
I had fully forgotten what we were talking about anymore. Again, though, he was kind of right about this being for homosexuals. I have to hand it to him on that.
I have
true.
to hand Miss Rex her flowers.
I think Rex may just be confused about what a critique is. 'Cause. 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 'C
So the Rocky Horror Picture Show is directed by Jim Sharman. Its screenplay is by Richard O'Brien and Jim Sharman. It's based on the Rocky Horror Show by Richard O'Brien. It's produced by Lou Adler and Michael White. It stars Tim Curry as Dr. Frank N. Furter, Susan Sarandon as Janet, and Barry Bostwick as Brad. It is narrated by Charles Gray. The cinematography is by Peter Sashitsky. It is edited by Graham Clifford. The music is by Richard Hartley, and the score is by Richard Hartley, and the songs are by Richard O'Brien. Production company is Michael White Productions. It was distributed by 20th Century Fox, so it is officially Dr. Frankenfurter is
a Disney princess.
It was released in the UK, I should say, specifically on August 14th, 1975. It was released in America, I think, in September 26th, 1975. Its running time is a gorgeous 100 minutes.
Stunning.
Its budget was $1.4 million.
This is crazy. I'm reading this. This is insane.
And its box office, so far up to today, up to the most recent time the Wikipedia page was updated, is $226 million. However,
Amazing.
I will say it's on the list as number 4 of the slowest movies to get to 100 million.
Oh, interesting.
Because
look,
it took
homosexuals have money, and they will
just give
pay
us
for
some
things.
time, girl.
All right, Reed?
Okay,
Just let it become a cult camp classic.
Well, that's the thing.
Reinvest over time.
I mean, that's the thing. It's probably like the midnight movie showings, right? Obviously, that is still
Okay, well, let's talk about the midnight movie showings because this is how it achieved its cult status. Did you know that the Rocky Horror Picture Show is technically still in its original run?
Why are you yelling right now?
Because it's the craziest information.
Okay.
wow,
It's the
since
longest
75.
running movie in history.
That's awesome.
Wow, good for them.
So it opened.
What a time warp.
It opened and immediately was bad. Like, people were like, this sucks. This isn't good. I think they were going to do a slow rollout, which is what they used to do back then. And they canceled 8 cities on the tour of the movie before it was going to go wide. It didn't have it was going to have a Halloween New York City premiere, and they canceled it. Everyone was like, this is bad. Shelve it. It's done. For some reason, they were like, well, let's play it on college campuses with another kind of B horror movie, and we'll do it as a double feature. And even then, people weren't really seeing it. And then someone was like, there's these midnight screenings that'll happen for Reefer Madness and for the Flamingos, and I think this could work in that circuit, in the midnight showing circuit. So that's where the midnight showing started, and it has grown to a degree that there's no possible way that anybody could have predicted, because it's so massive. Every city on earth does these. This musical has been re-recorded in there's 87 productions of this musical. There's it's just the legacy that this musical has now from where it started is just, it's a trajectory that we have never seen on this podcast before. So one of the things about these midnight screenings that you have to remember are that there's something called counterpoint dialogue. And if you've ever been to
Showgays.
if you've ever been to Musical Mondays at Sidetrack, there's a little bit of this that happens in different songs and different numbers. Apparently it started in New York City at a screening, and it was they know the first person who did this, which is how, but
That's
apparently
so
they
wild.
do.
Yeah.
And the first line shouted back, and it was so that I don't even remember the person's name, but he was some English teacher at a high school. He was very quiet.
It's been kept through history, and you didn't write it down to report back on the podcast.
No, I didn't write down who it was. I just wrote down the what it was.
Irresponsible.
He just wanted to make his friend laugh. So they go to the midnight screening. The movie's starting. It's very early in the film. It's right when Molly tuned in at the age of 11. And she's standing under the newspaper out in the rain, and he shouts, "Buy an umbrella, you cheap bitch." And that is the line that started it all. So now, if you look online, you can find audience participation scripts for Rocky Horror, and it's every line in the movie has a retort that you yell back at the screen. It's really wild. There's also people who dress in costumes, because originally that was a way they would get people into the theater, was if you dressed in costume, you got in for free.
Oh, fun.
So this was to help boost just the number of people in the room. And then finally, there are actors at some places, not all of them, but some places they have actors who play the parts in front of the screen along with the movie. But they're not allowed to improvise. They have to match the film, basically beat for beat. They're supposed.
Gotcha.
It's like a very important thing that they still like are doing the movie.
Yeah.
So that's all.
It is like so interesting to think about, like, as a response to like how crazy the cult following is. Then like the movie is like, okay, let's develop the audience scripts. Let's develop like guidelines for
Community.
It's all community.
Yeah. Have either of you ever been to a midnight showing of Rocky Horror?
No, because famously this was my first time watching it.
Well,
I just said
yeah,
that
I guess I really meant RJ. Have you been to one?
No,
Yeah. Go ahead.
but I knew people in college that like did it, but I never got to go.
Yeah, I haven't either. And in fact, a midnight screening of Rocky Horror is like my low point in college, because when I was first came to Loyola and I was like really struggling to like adjust to college and stuff, there was some time where I and some other people in the learning community were supposed to go to Rocky Horror, like a midnight showing, and I bought a ticket and everyone else said they were going, and then it was like, oh, actually I'm not going to. And so I like put out money for this thing that it turned out I wasn't gonna, like, no one was gonna go with me. And I just remember like crying in my dorm room that I was like, I don't understand how friends work in college.
I'm trying to. That sounds familiar now.
Probably you two didn't go. I don't actually remember who the people were that didn't come, so this is not me trying to shade you two.
I remember
but
it was a lot of like the.
It wouldn't have been me.
It was a lot of the girls doing, like, obviously it was all.
I think it was mostly.
It was
girls,
mostly
yeah.
the girls, because a lot of them like have done it before, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, I often now will wait quite a significant amount of time if I plan something with someone that involves a ticket. I always like hold off on buying the ticket now, because I'm always like, I don't want no. Yeah.
I would want to go. After I read the script, the like audience participation script today, I was like, this seems fun. And everyone's like a virgin if it's your first time, and there's like an induction thing that they do before the movie starts and blah blah blah. Like it's a lot. I think it's a lot.
Yeah.
I will say these scripts are, I mean, I wish Sidetrack has one, and I'm sure someone should write it down, because it would really help, because sometimes people, like the people who aren't always there won't do it, but like people who are like, but I know there's a thing here, like there's a thing in Titanic right now that I should be saying, but I don't know the words, because the people aren't here. So if we could just do that forever, a new rule for any counterpoint dialogue created by fans, please document it.
Please catalog it.
Make a Reddit thread, like it could be so easy to catalog.
So that's all I really had about the cult status stuff. So let's talk about a little bit about the movie. It uses most of the same cast from the original London run, which is great. The only new people are Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick. And the studio was like, you have to cast Americans. They have to be American. They have to be American. And that was like, okay.
So like so that whole like prayer, the first scene, like with the wedding. So like was that originally just more British then, or was it changed for the movie to make it more American?
Well, I think that at least one of them might be Canadian, because isn't the show Love It or List It Canadian?
What are we talking about right now?
The bride is Hillary from Love It or List It.
Oh. Are you serious?
You've never watched HGTV before? Why is this taking you so? I am 100% serious.
An actor. Hillary from
I saw this before. This was like before we were even supposed to be watching. I mean, I read a whole article about it. And so unless it is like a just like extremely committed internet conspiracy theory, this is a thing that Hillary from Love It or List It, the remodeler, is the bride at the beginning of Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Hillary Farr. Rocky Horror Picture Show. Hillary Farr. She played Betty, the bride. Wow. That's so funny, because when it started, I was like, who is this Gilda Radner look-alike as the bride? So yeah, okay, great, okay. So yeah, then maybe it's like, maybe in the original show, it's just like... I don't
think it starts at a wedding in the original.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I read the plot, and I don't remember if it said that or not, but I was skimming. I like this quote from the costume designer. She said, "When I designed Rocky, I never looked at any science fiction movies or comic books. One just automatically knows what spacesuits look like, the same one intuitively knows how Americans dress." I had never
Drag us.
I had never been to the
absolutely.
United States, but I had this fixed idea of how people looked there. Americans wore polyester so their clothes wouldn't crease, and their trousers were a bit too short. Since they're very keen on sports, white socks and white t-shirts played an integral part in their wardrobe. Of course, since doing Rocky, I've been to the United States and admit it was a bit of a generalization, but my ideas worked perfectly for Brad and Janet.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
fun. That is so funny. I love that. So the set is very fun. So Hammer Horror, it was a studio production company from like the 20s to the 60s. And they were known for Frankenstein, Dracula, and Mummy. So they are, when you think of Frankenstein, Dracula, and Mummy, you either think of the Hammer Horror version or you think of the Universal Monster version. So either the American one or the British one. But they are like the two, when people think of those are the ideas they have in their head. So they got to use a lot of like props and stuff from the sets from those old movies. And the tank and the dummy that he rolls out for, or they reveal for the birth scene of Rocky, that's from The Revenge of Frankenstein in 1958, which is very fun.
That's very cool.
And apparently there's a bunch of like little stuff in the background that I'm sure people can go find. Not me. The director, who I forgot his name already, Jim Sharman, when they were selling this, 20th Century was like, we'll give you a bigger budget for the movie if you cast like Mick Jagger and you cast like rock stars, like if you cast really famous people. And he stuck to his guns and was like, we'll take a lower budget if you let us do the original cast as much as possible. And I really think in this show, especially because it's such a specific style that they're going for with the performances, and famously movies are not like rehearsed, obviously to the same degree that like a show is rehearsed and then does performances, that I think if they had cast other people, it would have been really wooden.
Can you imagine?
Could you imagine Mick Jagger playing Dr. Frankenfurter?
Can you imagine anyone that's not Tim Curry playing Frankenfurter?
How do other people do it in productions?
I think that this is nearly a Barbara Frankenstein.
Barbara Frankenstein.
This is nearly a Barbara Streisand Funny Girl situation.
100%.
I just don't think. Now, I think Rocky Horror is a better movie overall than Funny Girl is. But like the other people are also giving a lot. I don't say this to like demean any of that, but like if Tim Curry wasn't in this movie, it would not be what it is today.
Yeah,
it
it would not
100%.
No, yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
He's everything.
Fun fact: there's a Helena Handbag here in Chicago is doing a show called Frankenstreisand. So I think you're Barbara Streisand.
Something that's vibing in my brain about it. Yeah.
Meatloaf plays Eddie in the movie, but apparently the studio originally wanted Elvis Presley to play Eddie, and he was like
in 1975.
Yeah, he died in 1977, so he was still going.
It would have honestly that would have been iconic though.
That would have been crazy.
Yeah, and then he would have died literally.
They didn't tell the cast that under the table was the like Eddie's corpse. So when they do the reveal, that's everyone. The only people in the room who knew were Tim Curry, Riff Raff, and Eddie. He's not on stage, but he had to have the mold made of him, so he knew it was him.
Gotcha. I mean, in general, I don't believe in tricking your actors into not acting, but I'll allow it for this one.
I'll allow that one.
Molly, how do you feel about your actors getting pneumonia because you're forcing them to be in a cold pool in the middle of winter in the UK?
Well, the listeners will never know what Molly thinks because that was lost in the...
You should be so grateful that you're even in a movie. How dare you ever complain about anything as an actor? I can't even believe that people have opinions.
Susan Sarandon while filming this movie. She got pneumonia.
Oh,
awful.
I thought you were making a
no
Les Mis joke.
Nope.
That's why I was like, they'll never know. We never did a Les Mis episode.
And speaking of Susan Sarandon, she was cast because she just happened to stop by the set to say hello to her friend
Shut
Tim.
up, boomers.
Shut up, boomers.
Just happened to stop by the set.
And that's why is it so hard for you to get a job?
She was cast from her looks, and they had her sing Happy Birthday, and then she was cast.
Okay, but she is transcendent in this movie.
I agree.
Don't understand. Like, Janet should be such a boring character, and Susan Sarandon makes me want to watch
Everyone's favorite Bernie bro.
Everyone's favorite Bernie bro.
I love her in this movie, and oh my god, is there a better career than Susan Sarandon? It's like, if you could live any one performer's life, I feel like I would pick Susan Sarandon.
She's so good in this movie.
She's so good in this movie. She's had such an interesting life.
It's so interesting.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
She's in Enchanted, one of my favorite Disney movies.
Mm-hmm. That's the only thing of note she's ever done. That's it.
Did you watch Feud?
No, but I heard it was great.
She was honestly.
I'm so sorry.
You have to watch Feud.
You have to watch Feud.
I will.
You won't, but you should.
I will.
Yeah.
I feel like
I will have
good years left in me. I don't know.
I will have to warn you. Feud Betty and Joan. I will have to warn you. Feud Betty and Joan is for the homosexuals. So
yeah, if you want something that's for gay people,
you know me and how I feel about queer media. I don't know, but
not in this movie though. I think this movie is
this is very straight.
Very straight.
This is
very
very
straight camp actually.
Yeah.
This is Peter Hinwood, his last movie. He plays Rocky.
Oh.
He now owns an antique shop in the UK and gets embarrassed when people bring this movie up. So he's not like mean about it, but he just doesn't talk about it.
I did read that he says he's kind of cringes because he thinks he's not a very good actor, but iconic. But he delivers everything I want from him in this movie. But also I read that he is an antique dealer because he just wants to have a quiet life, and that's so sweet and cute.
It's yes, so sweet. I love that.
Well, let's get into it. So I really like the framing. Okay, so there's the lips and the whatever. We'll talk about that in a second.
Oh,
but
we're coming back to the lips. Okay.
No, Molly was
coming
like,
back to the lips.
I did so much research on these lips.
I have
Please
some
do
stuff
not
to say about the lips.
I had never seen this, obviously, so everything was so brand new to me.
Yeah.
That when I realized that there was a narrator framing device of a criminologist,
he had to pause the movie.
This is smarter than I thought it was. Like, I thought, I don't know why I thought it something.
Adam thinks gay people are dumb, just so everybody knows.
Well,
you got me, gal.
Young, dumb, and full of cum. Am I right? Yeah, I was very pleased by this by the framing device of the criminal. I thought that was very fun that we kept going back to him. Mm-hmm. Now we can talk about the lips.
I'm so glad you stopped as we're talking about the lips for that deep dive on the criminologist.
I really didn't think you were gonna have to say. I didn't know if there was gonna be anything said about the lips, but we can talk about them.
So the lips are a nod to Observatory Time, The Lovers, which is a 1936 painting by Man Ray, according to the Rocky Horror Wiki. And to quote manray.net, that painting has been described as the quintessential surrealist painting, a supreme example of isomorphism, the use of organic forms oddly and obliquely referring to man, in a kind of fastidious realistic illusionism, the unifying theme in mainstream surrealist art in the heyday of the 1930s. How dare you interrupt my quote? It is called Observatory Time, The Lovers by Man Ray. It's just a painting of giant lips over sort of a desert landscape. I actually meant to put the image in the Google Doc and I just forgot. Yeah.
Big lips.
Big old lips.
Big lips.
Big
lips.
Big
little lips. Yeah, huge lips on the landscape.
I don't know. There's something really beautiful about that whole quote that I just really wanted to read it all out.
Isomorphism, baby.
Isomorphism. So I think
I know what that means, right? But let's say someone doesn't.
I think it is the use of organic forms oddly and obliquely referring to man is what I think that the last part, the next part is
the explanatory comma.
It's in fact highlighted in front of my face.
So surrealist painting, but then also they point out in the Rocky Horror Wiki, it sounds like maybe this hasn't been directly credited, but there was a production of Not I in 1973 at the Royal Theatre.
Yes, baby.
So Adam, I need you to know that I will resign as a host of this podcast if you don't insert some audio of Not I.
Please give our Hislith 3 experience.
Okay, here's a little bit of Not I.
No matter, parents unknown, unheard of, he having vanished, thin air, no sooner buttoned up his breeches. She similarly, 8 months later, almost to the tick, so no love, spared that. No love such as normally vented on the speechless infant in the home. No, nor indeed for that matter, any of any kind. No love of any kind, at any subsequent stage. So, typical affair, nothing of any note till coming up to 60 when, what? 70? God! Coming up to 70 when, wandering in a field, looking aimlessly for cowslips to make a ball. A few steps, then stop, stare into space, then on, a few more, stop and stare again, so on, drifting around, when suddenly, gradually, all went out, all that early April morning light, and she found herself in the... What? Who? No! Kate!
Molly, can you tell the people what they just fucking listened to?
I think they should just experience it. No, so Not I is a monologue by Samuel Beckett, delivered by a person who's been cloaked almost entirely in black fabric, including supposedly blacking out the exit signs of the theater. Not safe. Don't do that now. And
don't
then
do
the
that
person
then. Don't do
it then. Don't do it ever. Safety first, everyone. The person though has red lipstick on, and so that they become sort of this disembodied mouth, and they give this seemingly stream of conscious monologue for what is it, like 12 minutes? I think.
Yeah,
long?
I think 15 or something like that. Yeah.
We watched the whole thing.
And we watched the whole thing.
And I'll tell you what, 12 minutes, it does feel like 40.
It is. It is a long
when you're just looking at lips.
experience. And
and you start to put like the lips become
a face.
It like starts to not look like lips anymore.
Well,
Did you have that reaction?
Yeah. Totally. But here's my problem that I have with this film, because we watch it in Hislet, and we would often watch it in Intro to Theater and Drama that I would teach at UW as well. And the film version of it's been filmed, it's been put to film, and so it's often shown in these theater history classes because it's a like doable thing to do in class to watch it.
Because no one does it anymore. So the
and
only
no one
way
does
to see it.
And oh my god, how do people ever learn this monologue? The issue that I have with the film, though, is that the film is like the camera is right next to this person's mouth.
Yeah.
And the experience that Beckett designed was for somebody to be live on stage where the mouth is quite far from you.
Right.
And so when you watch the film, honestly, the biggest thing that you watch is the way that like spittle forms in this person's mouth, and just how gross mouths are. Mouths are just extremely gross. And because someone's like really working hard to get all these words out, you're really like aware of that. But that like wouldn't be an effect of the show watching it live where you have distance from the mouth. And so I have resolved that if I am ever in a position of teaching Not I, if I were to show the film, I would find a way to shrink it down to give the experience of how it was intended to be consumed, because I think that teachers miss the point when they show that film. So anyway.
Literally, you can play it on an iPhone at the end
yes, that
of
is how it should be done.
room, and then like turn off all the lights.
Yes. Yeah. So yes, an infamous Beckett piece that theater people who have gone through the trauma of getting a degree in theater
That
will
and the-
Truly, it is
That and the mound of dirt with the head.
Yeah.
Those
It's
are
like
the two.
That's Endgame, I think. Yeah.
It's an educational
Endgame,
like
that's what it
standpoint in when you are this time you're like, it's too late to back out now on this theater major, and now I
That's the
have
point
to
when
do
you know.
literally like do a month of Beckett, and I'm like, oh, maybe my mom was right.
You see the spittle collecting, and then you start to wonder about your student loan debts in the future.
Yeah.
Literally, I remember when we watched this, Allie and I were eating snacks, and we were like,
Girl.
we were
How
literally
dare
like,
you.
Allie, let's stop. Amazing. Oh God, I miss theater school. Oh.
You went to theater school?
Sorry, school where I studied theater. Sorry,
Liberal arts education.
liberal arts education.
I'm referring to the Trixie and Katya moment where
Oh,
Katya
yes,
loses
yes.
her mind. She says when Trixie says she went to theater school, and she goes, "What did you think I went to school for?" She goes, "I don't know, small engine repair."
She does look it. So
So yes, the frame, the lips. The lips are the actress who plays Magenta. I'm sorry, I don't have her name in front of my face.
Patricia Quinn,
Patricia Quinn, thank you.
famous for dragging Aiden Zame.
Famous
and
for
his
dragging
depiction
Aiden
of
Zane
her on
and his
Snatch
depiction of her
Game.
on Snatch Game.
oh,
Yes, girl.
RJ is having an epiphany in this moment.
I completely blocked that out.
Patricia Quinn and...
Can you guys explain? I'm sorry, I have to. Can you explain the Patricia Quinn thing? Because I did try to explain it to Rita when we were hanging out recently, and I could not convey to her like why it was important to me that Patricia Quinn hated Aiden Zane's portrayal.
Okay, so Aiden Zane portrayed her as her like celebrity impersonation in Snatch Game, which is the celebrity impersonation challenge of Drag Race. But Aiden Zane was so bad at doing it
and kept referring to like her as having a drug problem or something, which she doesn't have. And that what was amazing about the moment is that Snatch Game is about capturing the essence of a person, but it doesn't have to be accurate to them in any way necessarily. It's like about an energy.
Yes.
And so the fact that Patricia Quinn doesn't understand contemporary ironic youth culture enough to understand why she should just say thank you so much for the compliment of portraying me on a television show, and not take seriously that anyone would like really make conclusions about her character based on the Snatch Game portrayal. So it was like we loved her for being an out of touch diva. Is what's important is that she took it too seriously, and gay people love that.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Patti LuPone.
Feud Betty and Joan. We love the fact that what's her name sued Ryan Murphy.
Oh, Olivia de Havilland.
Yeah,
we love that.
It is camp to take yourself too seriously.
Yes,
that's camp,
and that's why you're Susan's
Sontag. That's it.
That's why you're her contemporary. You're rivals.
I'm rivals with Susan Sontag.
Yeah, because she beat you out on Notes on Camp.
Just barely, but about 50 years, yeah.
So anyway, it's her lips.
Patricia Quinn's lips. Why couldn't Aiden Zane just do that? Just do lips for one of the answers.
Oh my God, could you imagine if somebody did Snatch Game and they just were the lips?
I just want to finish the sentence.
No, you
could you imagine a Snatch Game of
These
not
lips
I?
are too important. A Snatch Game, a Samuel Beckett Snatch Game.
Oh my God.
And you're just Estragon and you're just putting on your boots and they don't fit. Oh my God.
Or like you're in a dumpster. Yeah.
Can we put on a drag show that like has to be like deep theater
all
references?
have to do absolutely. Mother Courage, Silent Scream.
I did this summer. I did a party for my interns and I did a theater trivia and then I did a hardcore nerd round, and one of the questions was who wrote the essay The Theater and Its Double, and everyone was like, Molly, how dare you, we couldn't know the answer to this. And I was like, there was a Euphoria episode named The Theater and Its Double, so I feel it is in the zeitgeist and that you all should know it.
Yeah.
Which is written by famously
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep. You got it.
You got it. Okay.
The lips
fine.
are
We can
Patricia
move on.
Quinn. The voice is Richard O'Brien.
Oh.
So that's your first.
Interesting. Why didn't you tell us that earlier?
Your first bit of transvestism in the show.
You've been holding out on us.
Your first bit
It's
of androgyny.
so weird that you wouldn't tell us that until now.
This replaces in the show. I'm just going to talk over you. This replaces in the show. This song is sung by a ticket taker character, as if you are entering the movie theater to see. She's telling you what the movie's going to be.
I did not pick that up, but I mean,
there are a bunch of references. I have to go back real quick.
Isomorphism kind of took me out of that.
The lyrics refer to science fiction and horror films of the past and list several film titles from the 1930s and 1960s, including The Day the Earth Stood Still, Flash Gordon, The Invisible Man, King Kong, It Came from Outer Space, Dr. X, Forbidden Planet, Tarantula, The Day of the Triffids, Curse of the Demon, and When Worlds Collide.
I looked up some of the actresses that they name in that final song, and one of them was the woman who was in King Kong, who's the dame. Yeah.
Now it makes sense. And that was one of the things that I had said to Adam, like the music at times felt like it was like not for the show. Like I'm like all these references, and I was like, it sounds like this is a song about not Beatles-y, but maybe close to like Bowie. Of just like, this just sounds like a song that was put in here. But I'm like, oh no, this is specifically for the show.
Well, it's interesting. The article that I read for this episode talked about how the movie at the time was nostalgic for these B-horror movies, but the music is very kind of like contemporary to the moment. And in fact, it's kind of like even ahead of its time when it comes to the glam rock stuff, because that was like really big in the 80s, right? And so they almost like saw it coming a little bit, or like saw, you know, the beginnings of that sort of movement genre. I don't know. So it's interesting because the article talked about the fact that we sort of see it all through a nostalgic lens now, but at the time it was like kind of a mix of contemporary and nostalgia.
You want a movement, you should see what happens after my morning coffee.
As you blow your snot right into
RJ, do you ever
microphone.
feel like on this podcast, it's like Adam is our collective little brother and we just make fun of him?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because on the few instances that you and I will banter, Adam is like, wait, I have to say something.
Look at me.
I just was in the middle of a sentence for 10 minutes. That's the only reason.
We have a real like Roy sibling dynamic. Oh, dang it, you haven't watched Succession. Anyway.
Shiv, are you
Adam,
Shiv then?
Of course I'm Shiv. I'm always Shiv. And Adam's Roman. And people are apparently mad to find out that Shiv is in fact not the that Roman's not the youngest, that Shiv is actually, and I don't care what the writers of the show have intended, he's the youngest.
I'm not going by text, I'm going by
vibes.
I'm going by what's on the screen. You know what I mean? It's the author's intention is one thing, but like death of the author. Do you know what I mean? Shiv is the middle, and Roman Roy is the youngest. Yeah.
Anyway, Adam, Rocky Horror.
My only note that I wrote down for this movie was if the spectrum was camp to no cap, it'd be past camp. It'd be campsite.
Did you say camp to no cap?
No cap, bro. No, I said no camp.
Gen Z
Camp or
right
no
now?
camp.
Yeah.
I know. At first I was like, are you doing
okay.
BFFR. Be fucking for real.
Since we already talked about the music, I feel like that was the thing that like I was not fully like gelled with, because it was just very interesting to be like, the music felt very like rockabilly, you know, like it had that like greaser sound from like the 50s almost, you know.
Should we go ahead and dive into Damn It, Janet?
You beat the other girls.
Sure. Let's please.
To the bride's bouquet.
The river was deep, but I swam it. Janet. The future is ours, so let's plan it. Janet. So please, don't tell me to can it. Janet. I've one thing to say, and that's damn it, Janet. I love you. The road was long, but I ran it. Janet. There's a fire in my heart, and you fan it. Janet. If there's one fool for you, then I am it. Janet. I've one thing to say, and that's damn it, Janet, I love you. Here's the ring to prove that I'm no joker. There's 3 ways that love can grow. That's good, bad, or mediocre. Oh, Janet.
I want to give a shout out in this opening scene to the literal American Gothic couple that are in the background, and then
played by Patricia Quinn and Richard O'Brien.
Oh,
and then Columbia
is
the third girl. Yeah,
that's very satisfying.
It's
I'm
a
gonna
Wizard
rewatch
of
for
Oz
that.
homage because they're all characters. Everybody
but then
at the wedding.
Frankenfurter's just the coffin.
No, Frankenfurter is the priest.
The priest. He was the priest.
He's the reverend. He's the minister.
Okay.
Watch the movie, Molly.
Watch the movie. Gosh, I was getting my notes set up. It was busy. I love that there's so many references to death. Like they start the whole scene where he proposes to her by wandering through the cemetery.
Yes.
And then
I have to stop you, and I have to interrupt your sentence. So
I would never do this to you.
Where people are buried, there's 2 different ways to call it. You can call it a cemetery, you can call it a graveyard.
We are doing semantics.
Some people may be pedantic and confused. A graveyard is a yard of graves it has to be next to a church. A cemetery is not next to a house of worship. So a cemetery is like its own thing. So you meant a graveyard. You may continue.
Okay. Now that Adam has mansplained burial to me, the thing that I wanted to say about it, I love how I view this as a metaphor for heterosexual marriage as a trap and a curse, because they are going to this life of like unfulfillment, and then they're going to be brought into the beauty of the queer experience through their encounters with Frankenfurter and discovering that sexuality is something that you can explore and have fun with, and it doesn't have to be this one very narrow path that will lead you to sadness and destruction. And I also just want to say that I feel that the American Gothic couple is like the beginning of a lot of wonderful homages to just art history.
Yeah.
There's so much art in this. There's the Mona Lisa in the time warp. I feel like there's something in the kind of entry with the grandfather clock too, but I'm forgetting which.
There was another one later in the movie that I was like, ooh, another painting.
Well, yeah, and then the pool in the final scene has the creation of Adam, Sistine Chapel at the bottom of it as well. So it's a very heady and intellectual sort of thing. I was thinking about the fact that now these things are like so heavily referenced. And I'm not saying that people like didn't know what those paintings were in the 70s, but I'm more impressed with how thoughtful they had to be to put those references in, I think, in 1970.
You can't easily just save it as your phone background now.
Adam? Oh, you're muted. Oh, I thought that you were being obstinate and not saying anything back to me because you were mad that I followed up your cemetery correction with trying to say something else smart.
No.
Okay.
You would have had to say something smart. So no, I liked that. There's a bunch of references. There's like I didn't write this down because I didn't catch them watching the movie. So I didn't appreciate it as much, but apparently there's a reference to all the old Hollywood movie studios scattered throughout the film.
Yes.
In different ways. So like
RKO Pictures was the big
RKO Pictures is the like really obvious one. The mouse ears reference Disney.
Yes, that's right.
There's like a cat a cat on a shield which references MGM. There's like just a bunch of them like scattered throughout. And there's a list that's on IMDb if you want to go find it. But this movie is very aware of what it's doing.
Extremely visually rich.
Yes, for sure. What do we think about Damn It, Janet, and just the character of Brad?
Brad, I wrote down, set the standard for hot nerds. I used to be, I don't know, there's just something about having Brad and Janet be stripped down. When I first saw it in high school, that was like, oh. And then also like just these tighty whities on Brad, like there was some curvature that was very detailed when first presented, that I was like, oh.
Yeah, he's not wearing a dance belt underneath.
No. And I honestly, like, sometimes I think about how I'm very anti Hot Seymour in Little Shop.
You're pro Hot Brad.
I'm pro Hot Brad.
Well, Brad is
should be
hot. Yeah.
Yes.
He's supposed to be
like
an American all-rounder.
That like you get to like
corn-fed Ohio
turn
boy.
into like a deviant, and there's
Right.
something very hot about that.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense.
But I do think
He's
like
just annoying.
Yeah, I think performance-wise, obviously, I think not only is Janet more like charming, that character also just has more to grow into, because like Adam made the comment that like she's like the girl going to a gay bar for the first time, so she's like a little scared of like what's happening, but like super game to like kind of like find out more. But then it's like I can't imagine if this was my life. But then
on their way there, she's the one who's most hesitant, and then once they get there and realize what it is, she's more the one who like starts to have fun.
Although I don't know that Brad is like actually off-put by what's happening so much as feeling like he has to like redirect because she keeps looking to him as like, you're the man, like you have to like remind him of the telephone thing or whatever. But he doesn't necessarily seem totally off-put by what's happening, and he certainly lets himself be seduced without too much protest when Frankenfurter visits.
Very, very easily. Yeah.
I guess.
Because even in the beginning, he's like, oh, they're just having a party. Like, relax, Janet.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the party. So they get to the castle, and Riff Raff and Magenta and Columbia, who's another character that references Columbia Pictures, they all have they intro the song the time warp. Let's do the time warp again. Let's listen to a little bit of it and then we can talk about it.
Just a jump to the left. With your hands on your hips.
Dreamy, oh fantasy free me, so you can't see me. No, no.
This song, I think to me is when I was like, oh, they know what the concept is. Because when you have what I think it's for me, everybody at the party who's just like straight faced, but doing the dance. That's when I was like, oh, it's the whole thing is camp, like top to bottom, floor to ceiling. Does that make sense? I mean, I obviously knew it was camp from the beginning, but there was something about once it got to Time Warp that I was like, okay, got it.
Yeah, it's great. I don't even know how to put myself back into the I've never seen it before mentality in a way to pinpoint the same exact moment kind of thing. But I love that they're genuinely, there's a huge body diversity. Hello, Greatest Showman. This is what it looks like when you actually let there be people with different bodies dancing together in a scene. It's great. And there's also this vibe about the performers that makes me also believe that these are just a collection of what's his name, Richard O'Brien. Yeah, Richard O'Brien's friends. That just it made me think of the movie Vegas in Space. Have you two ever seen that?
No.
Julian made me watch it in college. It's a drag movie based on a party that somebody threw one time that was Vegas in Space themed. And it made me think of that. It was the same energy of I just on some level believe that somebody threw a party and somehow this film just spiraled out of it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I like too that something I really like about this movie is I don't know if this is always true, but I think I like more when a movie isn't perfectly polished.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie feels like they were we have one take. We have 6 rolls of film and we have one take for each scene. So do it to your best ability.
Yeah. But it wasn't anyone was ever bad.
No one was doing anything wrong, but it's the BFA-ification of musical culture where the dance now would be like too clean.
Yeah.
And it should be a little messy because it doesn't.
It's a party. Yeah.
Well, A, it's a party, and B, it's weird. Like, it's all weird. And it only makes you feel weirder that they're not all doing it exactly together.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it looked like some of those party members were like older, so it was like, oh, they're doing the choreography.
Well, first of all, they filmed this in like 1974, so I'm sure they were all high out of their mind. No, supposedly it was very professional because they knew they had a limited time, allegedly.
But the party just leads us into the main attraction. Dr. Frankenfurter enters, descends, and sings the song, Sweet Transvestite, which we will now play.
I think maybe we do this before the song plays. If you were a trans and or non-binary person and this outdated language is going to be upsetting for you, I mean, you probably are going into this episode knowing about some of this and preparing for it. But this is the part where we're going to be using some outdated language because we have to. And so just know that this is the point in the episode where we're going to have that conversation.
Hit it, Tim.
How'd you do, I see you've met my faithful hand-in-hand. He's just a little brought down because when you knocked, he thought you were the candy man. Don't get strung up by the way I look. Don't judge a book by its cover. I'm not much of a man. by the light of day, but by night I'm one hell of a lover. I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. Let me show you a rhyme and maybe play you a sign.
Iconic number.
Amazing. Oh, come on.
I can't. Tim Curry is so good in this movie. It should be illegal.
We had like a moment of like, he's just does not disappoint.
No, he's so good. And it's just so, he knows exactly. This is what you get with it's the Kevin Kline. It's the Barbra Streisand. They played it for years. They did it however long they did it.
They know the little nuances,
he knows just how unhinged it should be.
Yeah.
So the setup of the song is that he is the line that he's repeating is he's a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. Yes. And so there's this like conflating of these two terms, and they're both terms we don't use anymore. And so I did read an article. Now the article was actually about Laverne Cox's casting in the 2016 Fox version, and there's more to be said about all of that. But I think I want to start with what I learned about this language from this article. So the term transvestite, which refers to, your vestments, your clothes being different, was first coined in 1910 by Magnus Hirschfeld, who's a German physician and sexologist. And his actual definition at the time was erotic urge for disguise, but it was used for a long time to describe like a wide array of gender identities, right? And the article argues to the point about nostalgia that the use of this term was maybe even like already a little bit outdated, and that there's like maybe a sense of like nostalgia towards these definitions. And in terms of this term, the only person who I ever can remember like in my lifetime identifying with that term was Eddie Izzard, who then a few years ago did come out as a trans woman, so I assume does not use that term anymore. But I think of that sort of expression of like, I'm not wearing this to like indicate a totally different gender identity. I think of now as more like the term gender queer, of like I am sort of challenging the norms, boundaries around gender in the way that I'm choosing to dress, right? But it's not necessarily me being trans. It's sort of like how that's kind of the word that I think I would kind of use today to describe what I think people used to use the word transvestite to describe back in the day.
Yeah, because it feels definitely more like not statement, but like it's more like you're trying to make a point of how you're being perceived rather than finding terminology to help define yourself.
It feels like it's about expression more than identity as well, because it's like your vestments. The word transsexual first gained prominence in the 1950s with the gender affirming surgery of Christine Jorgensen in 1951. So Christine Jorgensen, there was a New York Daily News article about her in 1952. She had been a GI, and then she went overseas to get at the time was called gender reassignment surgery. And it's not clear to me how this article first became published, and if like she had all asked for that, or if they just like ran an article about it, like what her consent was in becoming a public figure for it. But then like this case kind of like got national attention. And then after that article got published, she then later made her like living making public appearances and advocating for the rights of trans people. So she sort of like took up a public mantle as a result of this. But the idea of like surgical changing of your body sort of gained attention and prominence in the 50s. But that's, I think, why we've moved away from that term, is because we now understand that you don't have to have surgery in order to be a real trans person, right? And so moving away from like transmedicalism, that hyper focus on somebody's body and genitalia and needing to medically transition in order to like actually change your gender. And so there was a lot of, at the time, that there's a lot of like differentiation between these two terms and a lot of intercommunity fighting. And this was a quote from the article. Each group sometimes attempted to lift their own group social standings by foisting the stigma of transgression onto others. So one interesting example of that was Virginia Prince, who at the time identified as, quote, a heterosexual transvestite, but I think is obviously a trans woman based off the fact that now uses she, her pronouns, founded a group trying to say like this is the normal group of people and like those other people are the weirdos, right? And so I think again this is why it's like it still feels weird for us as cis people to discussing this, is like we know that there's this long history of the community using this. Well, that's like those are the people that you should stigmatize, but like no, my little segment of the LGBTQ pie is the part that you should think is fine and acceptable and be part of the rest of society. And the thing this all reminded me of was the Hunter Schafer drama. Did y'all follow that? It's like a month ago. I feel like this was a big thing on Twitter. Hunter Schafer, star of Euphoria, so a very famous young trans woman, liked a tweet that was criticizing non-binary people for being out here being too sort of, you don't need surgery to be a real trans person, and blaming non-binary people for the fact that trans people still struggle to get medical procedures paid for. And so a lot of people critiqued the fact that Schafer had liked this tweet saying like, you're perpetuating this notion that like it's other trans people who are keeping you back from being accepted, rather than like it's cis hetero people, it's the patriarchy, it's like it's society that won't accept you. It's not like the fault of these other trans people for doing transness in a different way than you do. So remains a very difficult thing to this day.
Yeah.
That's history corner for now.
And even with like just like talking about, you know, earlier, like, yeah, there's still definitely a lot of people that still believe that like there is a right and a wrong way to be not like a norm. That sentiment obviously carries into the plot too, of like you could talk about like Brad and Janet and like how free are they after they kind of explore explore their sexualities with Frankenfurter and Rocky respectively. So it's like, and then like there's a sense of like, because even at the end of the movie there is a sense of like camaraderie, and then like when Frankenfurter's life is at stake, you like feel for him, you know, and like and like you can tell that like the Earthlings also all three of them like feel for him, even though they've just been taken through like a literal nightmare.
Yeah, I love the fact that at the end when Riff Raff comes out and is like, I'm gonna zap you and die, and you're gonna die. I don't remember the terminology, but like I'm gonna kill you basically. And then Brad goes like, and what is his crime? And Riff Raff has to be like, Eddie, the guy he murdered, to kind of like remind us all of that fact. But I also love that Brad's like, wait a second, like that's fine if you want to be gender nonconforming and pansexual, like that's all fine with us.
As he says in his corset and hose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Eddie comes out in the cooler.
You're not going to say anything else about anything I'm just saying.
No. Okay. No, but I appreciate it. I think you did a great job. So Rocky comes to life.
Yes, the Frankenfurter kind of like does like a time to show what I've been working on, basically.
And Rocky's hot, iconically. Not his haircut. His haircut's very 1975. But he's hot. And then he has this song about the sword of Damocles, which is that the one where it's like the sword's hanging by a thread and it's like over his head?
I think, but I didn't think to look it up. Hold on.
I think that's right. I'm trying to remember my Greek myths.
Yes, correct. It is. It's a sword swinging by a single strand of horsehair.
Ah, horsehair. So I thought that was like just another way that this movie is smarter than me. So then Eddie comes out of the cooler, and I guess in the original production it was clear that he was like a zombie. I don't think it's as clear in this one.
No, there's like no leading scene. There's no dialogue. It just all of a sudden he bursts out of the cooler. And I didn't even notice that he had like he had a scar on his head until like he was dead, basically.
Right. Because they've taken half of his brain to give it to Rocky. Right. So this scene's fine, whatever. This is Meatloaf. The song is good. Here's the thing. When this scene ends and he brutally murders Eddie, I wasn't like scared, but I was very surprised because I guess I thought we were just sending. I mean, I guess people die in Little Shop, so I shouldn't. I guess I was more surprised at the like It felt like a slasher more than like. Well, no, because I guess even in Little Shop, Seymour cuts up. What's his name's body, Mr. The shop owner,
Mr. Mushnick.
Mr. Mushnick. So I guess it's similar in that way. For some reason, I was just very surprised by the death. And I found that interesting.
Yeah, it is almost like the only like horror moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that's why I'm like not 100% sold that like that he needed a comeuppance, because
no, he has to die.
Because
first of all, he took a man, he lobotomized a man.
I'm just saying, because in the world
what is his crime?
What is his crime? I'm Brett. But in the world that we're like watching, it doesn't feel out of place or like out of bounds of whatever justice or laws or rules, that I'm like, okay, that made sense. He needed a brain. So it's very weird to be like on a judicial thing, like I have to kill you because you killed someone, says the alien. You know, like I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're picking up as like the specific thing to do.
I feel like the Eddie moment is the only thing that's like, it feels viscerally like he's doing something wrong. Everyone's reacting shocked to it, and like it feels like it's not allowed in the like alternate rules of the space, because there's like a lot of alternate ideas about like what it means to exist with each other that we understand in this castle, because they like come in and they're immediately treated to time warp, where you're like, I have no idea how this follows from anything else that's been happening, and like what is the society's like values here. But they make it clear that the Eddie murder thing is not cool.
Yeah.
But then we go after this is what I want to talk about. We have to talk about the seduction.
Oh. Loved it.
They go into separate rooms, Brad and Janet, and there's like monitors on them. And then in the middle of the night, Janet's asleep and Brad seemingly comes in and starts like making out with her. And then she's like, they're like in the throes of it, and then she takes off a wig to reveal that it's actually Frank who's seducing her. And there's like a little bit of back and forth, and then she finally gives into it. And then the exact scene is played again with Brad. So he like goes to seduce Janet, and then he goes to seduce Brad. And for some reason, this was the part of the movie that I was like, this is really scandalous. And I don't know why.
I think it's because that they're both treated in the same way. The fact that they do it exactly the same.
It's not a joke. The joke is the scene is the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not.
But it's not a joke.
The joke is not that they're having sex.
Or like that, you know, Brad's gay.
Right. That's also not the joke.
Because even like later when she's like, oh, I'm remorseful of what I did, and looks at the monitor, and like the very funny scene of Brad fully smoking a cigarette with Frank.
Post-coital.
Yeah, post-coital. And she's like, oh, Brad, how could you? But then is about to do the same thing to Rocky.
But then
you know,
this movie, let's say it came out in like 1997 in the middle of gay panic.
Yeah.
It would be like Brad is now effeminate. From this scene on, Brad is now like limp wrists.
It was it was a bit all along. He was gay all along.
Right.
Yeah. There's no like fear that this is secretly revealing that Brad is gay and therefore couldn't be with Janet. It's like she's upset because he cheated on her, which is fair. But like, not that she's like concerned about this means about like, can he be trusted, and like all that kind of like baggage that comes with the like secret gay husband trope.
Yeah. Which I thought that was like really kind of cool and progressive, even though whatever.
But it's that idea of like what was counterculture back then is like was truly just like a way of expressing what is right or like what is truth for a lot of people, you know? That it's just like, it's not, my sexuality does not define like any sort of status that I should have.
Which is really impressive considering that Adam invented bisexuality just a few episodes ago for Camelot.
That's right, for
so
Camelot.
it's wild that they, you know, were doing something like this in the 70s.
Yeah. Your contemporaries, Adam, took that from you.
Yeah. So then we have RJ's favorite song.
This was after I watched this movie in high school. This song was in my tight rotation of musical theater songs. And like specifically the movie version, because like Susan Sarandon has a very like not the best voice, but it's the perfect voice for Janet. Like it's like reachy and like almost out of her range, but it's like because it's like exploring a new range that she never had, you know, as a character. I just thought it was fun. And it's very weird to like that, like there's something about like all of them seeing it at the end, like and saying creature of the night. And like, it's like the, you know, the throes of like, it's not actually about Rocky. It's about her being in this new
and having
place.
Many sexual partners, right? I feel like that's what's being implied is, I feel like that's what the like metaphorical journey is for I want to say for Janet is that I feel like it's a metaphor for like, what if you had multiple sexual partners before you got married and settled for one person? And so I feel like that's what's important. And yeah, I feel like it is a number that is begging to be dragged up by having basically just men perform it from now on. Yeah. No women are allowed to perform.
Let's listen to a bit of Touch Me. Touch me. There we go.
I wanna be dirty.
Then if anything grows, while you pose, I'll oil you up and drop you down. And that's just one small fraction of the main attraction. You need a friendly hand, but I need action. Touch me. I wanna be dirty. Throw me, chill me, fulfill me. Creature of the night. Touch me.
I wanna be dirty.
Throw me, chill me, fulfill me.
Okay, so cut to he's Medusa'd them, which is very funny. That's a very funny bit. And then he has dressed them all in outfits to match himself with like corsets and yeah.
Yeah, I will say the one thing like 2022 that I don't like is that when he Medusas them, they're all in like naked. A nude form except for the science teacher who's like in a wheelchair. Yeah. And I just feel like it's one of those like desexualizing people with disabilities thing potentially. Yes. And he does get a moment at the end when he's de-Medusified that maybe we'll talk about in a second, because they all appear in these like fishnets and heels, and then you like see that they're under his blanket, which is like, that's very funny. But I didn't like that it's like everyone's sexualized except the one guy in a wheelchair, and I think that I would change that now.
Yeah, I was curious what the reason for that was.
Yeah.
What they would have talked about in terms of, was it for the joke of like the reveal of his legs, or
they just didn't think it wasn't even like a thing? It's like, well, he's in a wheelchair, like, you know, like that's just like the,
or it's supposed to be a reference to like FDR always had a blanket. Like I don't,
deep.
So they get de-Medusified and they're all wearing like corsets and fishnets, and they do this number. I don't remember what is the song called.
It's one of those numbers where like the visual of the costumes is everything with the number, not the actual song. So
I would say most of the songs in this musical are that, where it's like fun number.
Not really getting like the context of the words because the visuals are so much more striking.
Yeah.
Wild and untamed.
I think it's Wild and Untamed Thing. I believe. So anyway, so they sing Wild and Untamed Thing. We can listen to a little bit of it now.
Wild and untamed thing. I'm a bee with the deadliest sin. You got a head and your mind goes ping. Your heart pump and your blood will sing. To let the party and the sound rock on. We're gonna shake it till the life has gone. Roast in my bird to be saved from the trouble and pain. We're wild and an untamed thing. We'll be with a deadly sting. You get a hit and your mind goes ping. Your heart will pump and your blood will sing. So let the party and the sound rock on.
And this is the part where I really liked. They seem so vulnerable. which I really liked. And it's also like they're being manipulated to do this, but also they've learned maybe a lot about themselves at this point. So like when they get into the pool, they all kind of like
give in,
have an orgy and give in, and it's all very raucous. Yeah, this movie like careens off a cliff like right after the dinner sequence. I feel like. In like a very, not in like a bad way, but in just like a way where it's like, oh, there's no way I could have imagined. There's the one joke earlier in the movie where they like kind of reference they could be aliens.
And he like Frankenfurter like shushes.
Right. So you know that that's like a part of it. But the fact that then everything gets interrupted because Magenta and Riff Raff, who are brother and sister, which I don't think I realized up until the point when they reveal it, and maybe it's clear I just missed the line, but
yeah.
Well, they're very clearly like in a sexual relationship and are also brother and sister, so that makes sense that you were missing that. Yeah.
Very, very House of the Dragon or whatever.
Very Game of Thrones, yeah.
But alien.
But alien.
In space.
But I liked that they like. I liked how how far left we took a turn.
Yeah.
When they like come in with like laser beams and like a full spacesuit. I was like,
this is a mission, and we failed the
movie
mission.
am I watching?
Yeah.
Like it's so fun.
But it's that obsessiveness too of like that, you know, the 50s the B horror movies of like just crazy cartoon spaceship alien
Buck Rogers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then obviously Frank gets like killed and Columbia gets killed and Rocky gets killed?
Rocky tries to save him.
Yep, there's a King Kong
There's
sequence.
a King Kong reference up the RKO Tower. That's right. I forgot about that.
And like the lasers weren't working until finally they just did it enough that he fell.
Yeah. Wow, that's right. I forgot about the King Kong sequence. And then the tower falls and they fall into the pool and then he's dead.
Yeah.
And then there's a very funny moment where they're like, you can go.
We're gonna zap
the castle up to the planet of transsexual. Or Transylvania.
The planet of transsexual in the galaxy of Transylvania, I believe.
Yes. It's like the smaller yeah.
And so then they just like run out and then there's like a very like schlocky kind of effect that happens when the castle gets lifted off into space.
And then they're like writhing on the dirt.
Yeah. And then it's funny because the framing device tells us that they make it out by the end because it like starts with there's like police statements from the two of them or whatever.
Yes,
but we
that's
don't ever
right.
actually see them return to safety, which is kind of a horror movie expectation that we get to see the like, and now I'm home and
now
I'm
the
safe and I'm
police show up
processing.
and, yeah.
Right. We kind of never see that at all.
We just know that there was something where they were able to make
There's
statements.
evidence. Yeah. Yeah.
For the three.
But we somehow think that they'll be okay also because of the way that by the end they're kind of on Frankenfurter's side.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think that, like, I talked about that earlier a little bit, but like that's just that shift of being on his side, because even the audience, like, you also want to be on Frankenfurter's side, and I think if it wasn't Tim Curry, I don't think it would have that same effect.
I think also the "Don't Dream It, Be It" song to me is very drag, very trans, very sort of like, you know, you can be whatever your fantasy is, you can be whoever you are, you know, truly.
This doesn't fit with my fantasy.
This doesn't fit with my fantasy. Absolutely.
Oh, you think I could go home tonight? That's what Frankenfurter was telling.
Yeah. Frankenfurter is Valentina.
Yeah.
So to wrap up this conversation, I liked this. I think I really do want to do a midnight screening at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I don't know if this movie... I'll talk about it in a minute when we get to the Roger Ebert review, but I think this works better as a communal piece that you have to see with other people.
Yeah.
because like just me and
We-
RJ watching it alone.
Yeah, well,
there's stuff I appreciated.
I watch it in the bedroom. Adam watch it out here.
We do it separate, fully separate.
I mean, since I'm in a house with a 2 and 6-year-old, I did watch it like alone on my iPad. Like, please, none of you come into the room while I'm watching this.
Yeah. But I think this is a movie that like begs for like laughter in the room to make it all that much more fun.
Yeah.
Even apart from all the other antics that go on at the midnight screenings. But I did enjoy it. I don't know if I'd like seek it out a bunch, but I did enjoy it. I did have a good time.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would have had a better experience if I was like watching communally with the energy of, kind of like having that live situation. And I think like I would still pick Little Shop over this if it was like pick a movie that I would want to watch, even though they're not saying they're doing the same thing, but spooky, campy.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
I would still pick like a Little Shop to throw on.
Little Shop is like had an easier time though because it already has a plot line that it's mapped onto.
That's true.
Yeah. I think I might pick this over Little Shop, honestly. And it's just because of Tim Curry. I feel like his performance is so alive that in some ways I don't miss the communal experience because of it.
That's true. Yeah.
Shout out to the moment when he's like chasing Rocky, I think, and he like is like
on his
coming down the ramp and like in the dress. Do you know what I'm talking about? And he like runs into the wall screaming. That's great. Anticipation.
Classic.
That's great. The
also,
makeup.
The like awakening Rocky where he had the lab coat, but then like his like sparkly like gloves and then the safety gloves over it. Like just so funny.
Yeah, the article I read for today talks about how like the costuming choices and specifically the backwards corset is like so iconic that then every other production is somehow like a reference back to that rather than often an original
doing a
thing, right? Because it's like you can't not be referencing Tim Curry's performance of Frankenfurter ever.
Yeah.
It does feel like Frankenfurter is a role where it's like you can do what you can do, but it is also like there was the pinnacle of this was reached from the first. Because I would like if just like trying to think like how actors would try to access Frankenfurter, and it's not just about like being on the line of like man and woman gender ambiguity. There is something like X Factory special about Tim Curry that just feels like so I can't pinpoint it as just like, oh, just be like ambiguous and just be like, be in that line between genders. There's something. I love how he found the voice of this character because he originally apparently was going to do like a German accent to like reference Frankenstein. And then he was like, heard some woman on a bus, I guess, and she was doing this like very posh, over posh, like almost royal accent, and he was like, what if that was it? So he combined that and he said his mother's telephone voice, which I thought was so funny.
That's awesome. I think
he said that he liked his mom liked the show.
Okay.
But she did prefer when he was in Pirates of Penzance to go back to Pirates of Penzance. Because apparently that performance, the Queen Mother came to it, and so she was very proud of him for that, as opposed to Rocky Horror.
Oh, Queen Mother didn't come see this one.
Correct.
Yeah. I think this might be a good place to talk a little bit more about that 2016 version, since we're talking about iconic Frankenfurters.
Yeah.
So in 2016, Fox did, I think, a live musical of, or maybe just they aired a version of Rocky Horror Picture Show. So at first the role was offered to Adam Lambert, but he turned it down, quote, stating in 2016 it would be inappropriate for a cisgender actor to play a trans character. I feel, personally, I don't know how you two feel, I feel like, as I was referencing before, to me, Frankenfurter is like a gender queer, a gender fluid character, not necessarily a trans character. Although certainly if you identify with this, you could be like, I am gender queer.
Trans and gender queer, yeah.
Up to that person, but I don't personally feel, but I do think it's a very like non-binary role, so I do feel like maybe I can see that the case for making sure the person inhabiting it has some sort of a like beyond cis experience of gender, right? But then there was also trans community backlash to this. Lambert turned down the role So, no bad feelings to Lambert, but then it was offered to Laverne Cox, who enthusiastically accepted, who's a very famous trans woman. Then there's trans community backlash to Cox from a perspective that it was antithetical to contemporary gains made by trans people in terms of the depiction of the role. Cox said her only reservation was the use of the word transvestite, but that in 1975 it meant a very different thing. So Cox defended her taking of the role. And obviously, it's just a great role, and Laverne Cox is a great actress. And I understand just being like, I want to do this. Great.
I want to be Frankenfurter. Yeah.
And so what's interesting is in the article, the author of this article, which is called, by the way, Can I Be Frank with You? Laverne Cox and the Historiographic Dramaturgy of the Rocky Horror Picture Show by Cameron Crookston in GLQ, a journal of lesbian and gay studies, written in 2021. So Crookston cites David J. Getsky, who was talking about the concept of queerness. And Getsky says, one cannot be queer alone. Any queer formal reading must itself be relational, particular, and contingent on its situation and context. So Crookston makes this argument that in the original Rocky Horror, Frankenfurter is queer in relation to Brad and Janet. Brad and Janet are shocked by Frankenfurter, and it is like that normalness that makes Frankenfurter queer. But that Cox's depiction becomes this sort of double negative drag where the relationality is between the past and present of the trans identity rather than between the queer and the cis hetero. And another part of that is the fact that Cox, of course, is a Black woman, and that there's sort of that history of trans women of color being sort of erased from from queer history, and that now being kind of trying to be rectified with knowing about people like Marsha P. Johnson, right? And so the fact that trans women of color have been so central to queer liberation, but were so overlooked for so long. So there's that element from Cox's depiction. But also apparently in the original Frankenstein novel, the creature is in some ways sort of racially otherized, and that's been really whitewashed through history as well. So there's also this element of like the source text Frankenstein having been whitewashed a bit.
Well, he's racially green.
He's supposed to be yellow. There's this whole thing. I don't want to get into all of the. It's like complicated. There's not like one clear allegory of race, right? But there's like there is racial coding to the novel basically, and that he talks also about the fact that the films use this like lynch mob imagery as like metaphor for otherness in a broad way, but like lynch mobs specifically came after Black Americans, right? They're not like there as a metaphor. It was like a real thing that happened to like one really particular group of people. And so there's also that element to Cox's, the reading of Cox's body in the role.
And I think that's great of like, it's that idea of like, just like the word trans of like, it's always like kind of exploring either, you know what I mean? Like
it's in flux.
Yes. It's in,
yeah.
And so like it's super interesting to be like comparing what trans identity was before and now, and like flipping that, just like in the spirit of what the character Frankenfurter is doing, is like flipping what Brad and Janet and the audience is expecting, Wow. And I told Adam, I was like, this, just so many queer themes in this movie, and he's like, I don't understand what.
I don't see them.
Pretty straight-laced movie to me.
Yeah, pretty
gay?
self-explanatory.
Homosexuals? I don't know.
Not here.
Not in this film.
Well, maybe Rex wasn't right. Maybe this isn't for homosexuals. I would say straight people should watch this movie more than gay people. Everyone should watch this movie.
Straight people, you need this movie.
But straight people should see this movie, yeah.
So what have people been saying about the Rocky Horror Picture Show? So it was very hard to find reviews, but I found Roger Ebert's, because it's the only website that like correctly archives all of his stuff.
Go Chicago Sun-Times.
So the Rocky Horror Picture Show would be more fun, I suspect, if it weren't a picture show. It belongs on a stage with the performers and audience joining in a collective send-up. It's been running for something like 3 years in a former movie theater on King's Road in London, and it's found the right home here at the Three Penny on Lincoln. Trouble is, it should have opened there as a play. That's a rather unfair way to approach it as a movie, but then Rocky Horror remains very much a filmed play. The choreography, the compositions, and even the attitudes of the cast imply a stage ambiance. And it invites the kind of laughter and audience participation that makes sense only if the performers are there on the stage creating mutual karma. He really likes Tim Curry's performance in the overall critique of the film. He really doesn't have a ton negative to say. I think he gives it 2.5 out of 4 stars. But he just was like, it shouldn't be a movie. It should be an in-person experience.
I think it's also interesting going back to the roots of this podcast of kind of comparing stage and film often, that both I think that in some ways the film, he's right that it like maintains some of the energy of a stage play, but that also now it's transcended just being a film with the, what is it, counter dialogue? Is that what it's called? And so I think that the film now sits at this like medium place of the intersection of stage and film, right? It's not kind of understood as simply a film, and I think that that's very cool.
Yeah.
Transmedia.
Isomorphism.
Lips.
So on Letterboxd, Nick gives it 4.5 stars and says the reason why Brad and Janet's relationship didn't work is because they're both bottoms.
So accurate.
So true.
Wrong gave it 4 stars and said Brad and Janet are dead ass what I envision straight people at Pride are like. And featuring Dante from the DMC series gave it 5 stars and said Frank lived, he served cunt, and then he died.
Wow.
So
it's hard to argue with
heroic.
Heroic.
Braver than the Marines.
Happy Veterans Day.
Let's move on to our quiz.
A quiz?
Oh my gosh.
So, seeing as how the three of us have never been to a live mome for Rocky Horror Picture Show, we're going to have a little quiz about the props that the audience gets to play with during the participation. So on the left-hand side are scenes in chronological order or lines in the film. And on the right are a bunch of objects that are used during those moments. And you'll have to put them, Molly and RJ are going to put each of them together. And I'll tell you if you're right or wrong.
Okay.
Do we go down the list? Do we need to record all of our answers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Adam, read us the events.
No, I am very tired of talking.
Okay.
And I can't breathe.
Okay.
So the first is Ralph and Betty's wedding.
So I think rice is the appropriate
That's what I was going to
prop
say.
because they also do that.
Ding, ding, ding.
Correct. Okay, the rainstorm.
Water pistols?
Water pistols, absolutely, to create the environment.
Oh, or is it newspapers? Because they're
She holds up the newspapers. Get an umbrella, you cheap bitch.
She didn't get an umbrella.
Okay. Let's do newspapers.
I'm going to say newspapers, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think
Correct.
water...
Newspapers is correct.
Okay.
Okay. There's a light, has got to be the flashlights.
There's a light verse of Over at Frankenstein Place. Oh, when she's seeing from the window. Where they're seeing that there's a light in
Riffraff in the window.
Yeah, I would say flashlights on the face maybe, or just flashlights in general.
Flashlights in general, ding, ding, ding. This has been updated because most theaters do not allow you to open your cigarette lighter anymore.
And who carries a lighter anymore?
And who carries a lighter?
Everyone just brings out their vapes. Frank snapping his rubber gloves is presumably rubber gloves.
Very good. Yep.
Great.
He does it 3
Okay.
times during his speech, so you do it once each time with him.
Oh, fun. Transylvanians applaud Rocky's creation is the noisemakers, because I remember this from the movie. Because when he abruptly stops them, it's like clearly they're still winding down, but the sound stops.
Yeah. Great Scott toilet paper in a reference to Scott.
Specifically,
branded.
you should aim to get Scott rolls and you throw them at the screen.
I promise that we have not seen these, and we
we are
did
just
not
so
study.
smart. Yeah.
The
end of Charles Atlas
reprise. What is Charles Atlas? And
That's
what is
the
its
Rocky
reprise?
song where he's singing about how he created Atlas.
The reprise. Should we come back to that one, RJ, and process elimination? Unless you have an idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. Let's save it.
Toast.
Toast proposal at
Probably
dinner is toast.
Yeah, you throw toast at the screen.
Throw toast at the screen.
Fun. Does he say a toast or like
when he proposes the toast?
Oh, okay.
And now a toast.
Oh,
yeah.
That's fun. That's fun.
Frank celebrating Rocky's birthday at dinner is probably a party hat.
Yep.
Yep.
Did you hear a bell ring?
A bell.
Cards for sorrow, cards for pain, cards.
I don't know what they do with it. It just
They just
cards,
throw
and
it,
it's
I'm
like,
Yeah,
guessing.
and presumably they're like playing cards, so it's like.
So that leaves us
What?
water pistols for Charles Atlas.
Wait, did we use confetti?
Does one have two?
What? Oh, Rainstorm
Or did
was
you
water
add
pistols
one?
and newspapers, I think.
Oh, is
You have
Rainstorm
to
both of
You have
those?
to come to a consensus.
Okay, I
Oh,
think
or did
Charles...
wait. Well, can I confirm with the maker of the test that you didn't add an extra just
I
to
did
make
not
the
put an extra
exam
twister.
harder? Okay.
Okay.
I did not have enough energy.
So
to
yeah,
do that.
I think water pistols and newspapers were together at the Rainstorm so that people
I
are
guess
throwing
so.
water pistols up.
No, they must be shooting the water
Or
pistols.
shooting.
Surely, aren't they? They're not.
No, I
throwing
meant like, yeah, I meant aiming like up so that it gives
Okay.
the illusion of rain, or they shoot directly at people who are covering with newspapers.
I just wish I remembered literally any of the lyrics to Charles Atlas other than sort of Damocles, but only because Adam referenced it earlier on the pod.
Yeah, the song is just very much like he's flexing and they're all celebrating. So that's why I feel like confetti fits.
I mean, yeah, confetti.
So
Confetti is hard in that it could be in anything.
Charles
yeah.
Atlas is not the Sword of Damocles song. Charles Atlas is the song Rocky sings, being like, "I created this."
It's
And then Eddie comes in and does his song, and then they have another time where he sings the Charles Atlas song, and then they go into the bedroom.
it's the slower one. It's the bridal like walk into the bedroom.
Walk to the bedroom.
So that should be confetti.
So is it Frankenfurter's song about Rocky? You mean?
Yeah,
Or Rocky is singing it?
it's Frankenfurter's song
Yes?
about Rocky.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the reprise, so they're walking into the bedchamber to consummate their love. So I think that
I
is
need an
Okay.
answer today, guys.
I guess yeah. I'm after asking all that information, I'm just gonna go with what our
So yeah, confetti for Charles Atlas, and the people in the
and we'll
back.
confetti.
Confetti for Charles Atlas, and people in the back shoot water pistols toward the people in the front who have newspapers to cover their head.
Oh. See, that sounds
multi-layered
like
audience experience.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Sounds like a lot of money to spend on props.
Delightful.
Okay, that was the quiz.
Oh, sorry, delightful. Thank you, Adam, for preparing that.
You're welcome. Quickly before we go into our closer, my MVP. I actually don't want to say who my MVP is. Molly, your MVP is, I'm assuming, Tim Curry.
Yeah, obviously.
My MVP is Susan Sarandon as Janet.
Close follow-up for me. Yeah.
Mine is Richard O'Brien.
Oh, yeah.
When I realized that who I really like Riff Raff in the movie, I think he's like really good at doing that the whole time.
And like multiple characters. Like the riffraff in the castle and the alien riffraff feels very different.
Oh yeah, that he like changes characters toward the end of the film.
Yeah.
But then that I also learned that he did the music and lyrics and book. I was like, oh, well.
Oh, then you are an actual MVP.
Yeah.
You are the MVP. Okay.
Yeah.
Molly.
Deserved. Closer. What horror trope has not yet been fully explored by the musical theater canon that you would like to see explored in a future show?
So this is tough because there's Ash versus the Living Dead. There's Zombie Prom. So like we're getting there. I don't think there's like, so that's like hacker, slasher, and zombie. So I'm thinking of other tropes. Exorcism.
I do like a zombie flick, but I like a serious, threatening zombie flick, which I feel is very straight and therefore not musical theater fodder.
Unless you make
musical theater has conquered Victorian kind of gothic horror because they did like Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh yeah.
And it was like really good. They've done B Schlock Camp, B movies, great. How about some like gore, some gore porn? How about Saw the musical?
Sawsicle.
Sawsicle.
I think the scope is there. It's
Sawsicle
the melodrama. Yeah, Sawsicle the Musical is a great title.
Or I mean, they did Carrie, but it's like allegedly not good.
I just got it.
I do something they can use like stage. Like I do think Carrie should work though on stage, maybe in like a better adaptation.
But that's the thing. I feel like I only buy horror musical theater if it's campy, like if there's humor in it.
Sure, I just mean like Carrie specifically is good because you want to see someone stand on stage and get pig blood drenched on them.
Yeah.
and then see her fully just like
Sweeney Todd. Plus,
Sweeney Todd.
Todd.
We also have Heathers, which is a beloved musical that's kind of in the slashers, but just like
dark comedy.
dark comedy. Yeah.
I would do. Give me like a witchy, like
moment.
a witchy
Hocus
moment.
Pocus?
Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
No, I mean like straight up. What are they
The
called? Like,
Witch.
yeah, like what is it called? Like a coven. Like give me like a coven of witches and they're
American Horror Story Coven.
yes. Oh my God, feuding covens, supreme feuding.
I mean,
Yeah.
Pippin was basically American Horror Story Circus, so.
yeah.
Right.
Like give me like a drama about like a drama musical about two competing supremes and then they just like
Yeah.
But also, you have to think about on stage, what works well are like interior scenes. So like Misery would probably be a
Ooh.
really good musical.
A last
a
5
mi-
years kind of treatment.
Oh,
Right. Yeah.
a musical. Actually, more Stephen
Yeah.
King musicals.
Misery the Mercical.
Shining the Scherzical.
Shining the Scherzical.
Oh,
I
The
would see
Shining actually would be
the
sick.
Shizicle. Yeah, I could see that.
I think that now I think we need a couple more years of cooling off from Twilight and all of its various backlashes and resurgences. Then I think we could use a vampire
like-
musical.
But like when we miss it, when we start
Well,
missing it.
It's not that we miss it, it's that I want it to not be in relationship to Twilight somehow.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be a spoof of Twilight. I don't want it to be an homage to Twilight. Like I want
Do
Twilight
you want
to,
it like
to not
50
have to be part of the
Shades where it's
conversation.
like it was originally
No,
a Twilight
RJ, you're very
fanfic?
much not listening to what I'm saying. I'm saying I want Twilight to
I
be
want
out of the
Twilight,
equation.
but it can't be Twilight.
I want it to be about vampires, which is a genre, a creature that has existed for a long time in folklore before Twilight happened. And I would like the other facets of vampire lore to be explored without feeling like Twilight
So
has
they
to be a
don't-
major part.
They don't sparkle in the sun.
No sparkling, no sense.
Wow, 2011 called and it wants its jokes back.
I mean, that's what
Okay,
happened
Dane
with
Cook.
Twilight. Who?
I would also do like an actual exploration of a like occult phenomena. So like the Mothman, like in like the Legend of the Mothman.
Cryptids.
Yeah.
I like, but
Cryptid
almost like
zoology.
this is gonna sound offensive, but it's not. But like almost like a Laramie project, where it's like,
Oh, it's like
where
a
it's-
found thing
where
where
it's like a found, like they're
Docu-theater.
what is that?
docu-theater.
Yeah,
They're
docu-theater.
collecting
Yeah.
people's
Yes. Experiences with the
experiences
Mothman.
of it, and then we get like
It's
monologue.
It's come from
songs.
away. It's
Come
come
from
from
away
away,
from
but
Mothman.
it's Bigfoot.
But it's Bigfoot.
But it's Loch
But
Ness.
the poster will say the Laramie Project of Mothman.
No, that's we don't
Just
have
to really
to.
get some
Roger
buzz.
Ebert will say that for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God.
Rex
Rex
whatever.
Reed will say
Rex
that for
Reed,
us.
yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm sold. I'm into that. Like explore other urban myths and occult that we don't know yet, you know?
When is somebody going to take one of these amazing ideas we come up with on this podcast
We
and do
just are
something
giving
with
them
it?
away
Where-
for free.
Where is the Katy Perry
Unbelievable.
jukebox musical? We've mentioned that
Yeah.
so many times.
Who?
Katy Perry
Oh, yeah.
jukebox musical.
Are trying to
Who?
true.
You forgot who Katy Perry?
Katy Perry?
Sorry, who?
Catherine Perry?
I'm unfamiliar.
Oh my God. Okay.
Well, that's enough of that.
Honestly, the real horror would be a musical, and it would be a podcast host like slowly
Dying on the
dying on
episode
the episode just by
Of
hacking
consumption.
bits
of
of
consumption.
love.
It's TB.
That should be the musical.
I have to cough into a handkerchief, and obviously it's bloody.
Obviously. Yeah, and then you have to motion to your chest like, ooh.
Okay, we're done. We are finished with this because we have an announcement.
We do?
Oh, that's right, Molly. Yes.
Next episode, we are not reviewing a film.
Uh-huh.
Next episode,
Yeah,
we will
take it
be
away.
unveiling the first ever Showgays Awards. It is our 1 year
Period.
period. We haven't come up with a name.
The showies.
The Showies.
Or the showgays, but
It'll-
that doesn't.
We've
like
officially
that.
passed like our 1 year, so we're gonna do a new tradition, a new annual Showgays Awards, where we will be talking about different.
It's the Showies, but just like the Academy Awards, the statuette is called the Molly, like the Oscar.
Aww.
And the Molly goes to, and it's actually just
Molly.
Molly.
We'll be shipping Molly to different people.
I'll just leave them all a voicemail saying, good job.
Yes.
Good job.
Would you like to film a video for us? And so we are going to be hard at work finalizing the different nominees, but obviously we'll have like best movie musical, best performances, best performances by either a performer or a, appliance.
Since we're finally recording these somewhat close to when we release them, you could probably tweet or email us to tell us a category you'd like us to record, and we might see it before we record
Absolutely. So yes, that will be our next episode. So that'll be the episode mid-November. And
it's only going to be movies from when Molly started. We're not going back into the depths.
Yes, this is only season
archives.
2. It's only revival.
Only revival era. Only.
Right. Maybe there's a best bit. What was one of our best bits?
That assumes that we remember all the bits.
I know. Well, Molly just said she doesn't even remember anything after the recording.
Yeah. Head empty. No thoughts.
Can't lose.
But yes, so stay tuned for that.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
This is just touch me. I wanna be dirty. Very joyful, feel me. 'Cause you're
Thank you for listening to the best revival of a podcast, Showgays. You can find us on social media. Adam is at Adam Noecker on Twitter. RJ is at RJ Food Rocks on Instagram. And Molly is at Molly Matiny on Instagram. This episode was edited and mixed by Adam Noecker. This has been an Ampliverse production. You can find our show page and more information at theampliverse.com. If you'd like to send us your own takes on the movie we just watched, reach out to us via email and we might read it aloud on the show. Our email is showgaysmoviemusical@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to help others find the show. And now, as always, the show must go on, so stick around to hear what we're going to be watching next episode.
Live from Chicago and San Diego, it's the first ever annual Showgays Showies Awards. See if your favorite movies and performances from West Side Story, Everybody's Talking About Jamie, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show will take home their first ever Showy.
Discovering voices, building worlds. The Ampliverse.